I bet you're wondering why this happened to your hair when you colored it. Well, we're going to talk about that and so much more in this video today because I so badly want people to not mess up their hair at home. That's not what I want. I mean, personally, I am a hairdresser, so I'm totally great if people come in to see us, but I do understand that that's not in everybody's budget, and I'm so tired of hairdressers shaming people for that because really, truly, it's them shaming them. All right, you want to color your hair at home? I get it. It's more affordable, but let's go over a few things before you do because you don't want to mess it up and have bad hair for the time being. I have been a cosmetologist for over 10 years, and I have been teaching cosmetology for about 8 years now, so I have a lot to say. I don't want you guys to think I'm completely discouraging you from doing your hair at home. I get it. There are times that is completely reasonable, and there are reasons to do your hair at home. Pricing being honestly first and foremost in people's brains right now. People always talk about how getting your hair colored is a luxury, especially in this day and age, and they're like, well, if you can't afford it, don't come. Well, hi, I grew up very white trash. I'm not white, but I grew up with no money. I understand. So let's get into how you should go about coloring your hair at home, as well as some tips and tricks on what is best for you. So the very first thing that I want to cover is box dye in general. When we think of box dye, we often think of something like this that you can get at Walmart. I mean, Garnier, L'Oreal, I'm trying to think of another brand right now. Color Silk, I think, is one. I might be wrong about that. But there are lots and lots of brands that we can get that are box colors. Most people, unless you're a cosmetologist, don't realize that actually Sally's hair color is considered a box dye too. But I think that Sally's hair color is still better than what we would consider a traditional box color. So keep that in mind. It's going to be just like a few more dollars, but to me, those few more dollars are very, very well spent in choosing a Sally's color over something like a box color you can get at Walmart or the Dollar Tree or something like that. Now, we are going to cover quite a few things from start to finish, especially if you've never colored hair before or you don't know anything about it. This is very much a crash course on how I would expect someone to go about this. I have so much knowledge in my head, so I'm going to really try not to overwhelm you guys. If you have questions, please drop them in the comments below. I am curious. As someone that's done hair for over 10 years, there is definitely times that I forget that I have knowledge, and I've touched hundreds of heads with their knowledge, of course. I don't go around touching people's heads without permission. That's a curly hair nightmare. But I have touched thousands of heads at this point, and there is so much to know. So just know this is a little sprinkle of knowledge for you to be able to color your hair at home. When we're talking about box color, one of the things that I always tell people is box color itself, when we're talking about grocery store box color, is going to be the most aggressive formula because it's formulated to work on anyone's hair. If it's light, if it's dark, if it's gray, if it's, whatever the case may be, that's what it's formulated for. So it has to kind of be aggressive because it's like the one size fits all of color. Now, why I say Sally's is a little bit better is because you can still tailor Sally's a little bit better to you, what you're looking for, all of that. So let's get into that slightly. I want to bring up Exhibit A. So when we're looking at hair color, right, you're going to choose at Sally's, right? You're going to choose your hair color, the color that you want to exist on your hair, and you're going to choose a developer. Now, something very important that I want to note with developer. I find that many people don't, including hairdressers, don't understand what developer actually does. So developer is what's considered an oxidating agent, which means that it's going to control the speed at which oxygen is introduced into your formula. Now that's a really high level, but what that means for hair color is actually a 10 volume is going to do essentially the exact same thing as a 40 volume, but a 40 volume is going to do it faster, a 10 volume is going to do it slower. I have a video that I want to show you guys that illustrates this. I'm going to scoot over and show you that clip because I think that it illustrates this very well. Colors with Chemistry is a great person to follow, and she does a lot of experiments like this where she kind of talks about the difference. But let's get into it. I'll put up the video. We'll watch. The reason that I like that video is because I feel like it very clearly shows that in the end, the 10 volume is actually going to lift to the same level as the 40 volume. They're just going to take a little bit longer to get to the same place. A 10 volume is still going to do the exact same job that a 40 volume is. It's just going to take a little bit longer. So the reason that I bring that up is because when you're choosing out your color, you're also going to be choosing a developer to go along with it, your 10, 20, 30, 40 volume, right? The fact of the matter is, unless you're trying to make your hair lighter, which that's a whole nother story we can talk about in a separate video, but unless you are trying to lighten your hair with color, there is absolutely no reason for you to use anything higher than a 20 volume. Let me repeat that. Unless you're trying to lighten your hair with color, there's no reason to use anything higher than a 20 volume. Okay, so there's two things I want you to consider when you're determining which volume that you're going to pick. The very first one is, am I going darker and like than your natural color? I'm gonna say this as just a caveat. You can't lift color, or you can't lift colored hair with color reliably. So again, that's a whole nother separate topic that we can talk about at another time. But the first thing that I want you to consider is, are you going the same lightness or darkness as your natural hair, or are you going darker? And do you have resistant hair? Meaning, is it gray? Is it very coarse? Is it, I mean, those are essentially the only two. So I guess, is it gray or is it really coarse? If you are going darker, and it's not super gray, not super coarse, just pick 10 volume. You're going to get the results that you want, okay? If you have very resistant hair, so if it's really gray, really coarse, really resistant to everything, you're going to want a 20 volume. Now, the reason that you want a 20 volume actually has nothing to do with 20 volume being more powerful. Still, the power is always in the color. The power is in the lightener, the power is in the color, the power is in the color, not the developer. Let's get that out of the way. Think in your head that the developer holds no power. And I'll show you a video that kind of illustrates this in just a moment. But we're getting that out of the way. The reason that we want a slightly higher developer when we're working with something that's a little bit more resistant is actually the speed. The speed makes a huge difference, right? If we want it to penetrate into the actual cortex of the hair, which is where our hair holds pigment, right? Then we need something that's going to work a little bit faster in the processing time that the color needs. So let's say that a color processes for 20 minutes. We want that color to oxidize a little bit faster, add that oxygen in a little bit faster to really break through that coarse resistant hair. Otherwise, we would have to use a 10 volume for longer. Does that make sense? Hopefully. If it doesn't make sense, let me know and I can go over it another time. But essentially, the coarse resistant hair needs it to happen faster because otherwise we're going to have to wait a lot longer, which is typically not wanted or expected, especially if your color already sits or has to process for 30 minutes. We don't want to have to process it for 60 minutes to get the desired results. So hence, we're going to use a 20 volume instead. Let's go ahead and watch this video so that you guys can kind of see what I mean by the power is in the color, the power is in the lightener, the power is never in the developer. Let's take a look. Oh, and by the way, she is using, in case you can't see it on the screen, she is using on one side, she's using lightener with a little bit of water, and she's using just developer on the other strand of hair. Let's go. So that video, I think, is a great example of where the power is coming from. Like I said, the power always comes from the lightener or the color. It never comes from the developer. In that picture, we clearly see there's still quite a bit of lift and shift when we added a little bit of water to our lightener versus just developer by itself. The developer by itself is just an activating agent. It just starts that chemical reaction. It's really not where the color is coming from. It's not where the pigment, it's not where the power is happening. That's why I really do like that video. And the same thing would actually happen with hair color itself. If you added water to hair color, you're still going to get some of that chemical reaction because water actually has some oxygen in it to kind of start that process. Now, I mean, the results are going to vary with lightener too, but some chemical reaction is going to happen just with the color and water and just with the lightener and water. So the only reason that I'm going to recommend you having a 30 or a 40 volume is if you're trying to lighten virgin hair. Now, let me repeat myself. Virgin hair meaning you have a zero color in your hair. You've never toned it. You've never lightened it. You've never done anything else. Anything that you've done anything with has been cut off, removed from your head. That is the only time that I would recommend it if you're going lighter. So let's say your natural hair is as dark as mine and you want it to be a very caramely blonde. Yeah, that's possible. My hair's not virgin hair, but let's say it was. I could pick, and because we're going to Sally's and not the grocery store, right? I could pick something that's a level 6N. I'm sure Sally's has something like that, but for those of you that don't know, that's going to be like almost brown, but a little bit darker of a blonde. You know what? Let's say that I want it to be more like a 7 or an 8. So a level 7N. So that's a little bit lighter of a blonde, right? I could pick up a 7N. My hair is about a level 4, so it's fairly dark, right? And add 30 volume to it and lift my hair that way. But this only works reliably on virgin hair. So I want you to get it out of your head that you're going to be lightening your hair with anything other than lightener, especially if you already have something else in your hair, period. Okay. Now, if you're going darker, that makes our conversation a lot easier. So now that we have our color picked out and our developer, I want you to ask yourself, are you wanting to go lighter than your natural hair or are you wanting to go darker, right? Because again, that's going to play into that conversation we just had. But if you're wanting to go lighter, I can make a whole nother video on lightening your hair. I don't want to get too much into that because that is a whole nother conversation that's gonna need some nuance to the discussion. But if you were going darker, there's a few things that I want you to kind of think about in your head. If you've ever taken any sort of art class or you know anything about color theory, mixing pigments, things like that. Let's say that your hair is a very light blonde. Let's say it's about this color. This is about a level 8, okay? And let's say that you're wanting to be black. Black as night. You want it to be blacker than my dad. I'm kidding. My dad is fairly black, but he's actually not that dark. So let's say you want them to be, you want to be dark. You want to be a very dark color. Something to keep in mind is a little bit of color theory when it comes to this. Because black, naturally, if you're thinking about color theory, the way that you make black is you do actually have to add all of the colors to make a black color. So the primary colors are red, yellow, and blue. You need all of them. You need all of them to make a brown color. You need all of them to make a black color. So I want you to think about the concentration of blue that you would need and then what color this color is. Just for a minute, I want you to think. The concentration of a black has what in it? The primary color in your hair at a level 8, this color right here, is what? Now, if you said it's pretty yellow here and the black is going to be pretty blue, what does blue and black make? If you're not shouting at your screen and saying blue and black make green, I think you need to go back to kindergarten. I mean that in the nicest possible way, but blue and yellow make green. So if you've ever colored your hair, went from light to really, really dark and didn't add some of what's like the missing pigments back in, you are going to turn green every single time. And it's never fun because it always turns into, I'm going to see if I can find a picture. If I can find a picture, I will pop it up here on the screen, but it turns kind of this muddy greenish color. If you know, you know, like it's impossible to unsee if you've seen this color happen. So how do we avoid that? So this kind of brings in the conversation of filling the hair. So essentially we talked about the way that we make any color is with all of the primary colors. We need red, yellow, and blue. Well, at this really light color, we have a little bit of yellow, maybe a little bit of orange, but at black, we have a ton of blue and not very much of the other colors, right? So we're gonna wanna put just a little bit of red and orange into it so that it doesn't turn green going down. Because I want you to think about this. We knew yellow and blue make green, right? Well, let's say we add just a little bit of red to it. Well, yellow, red, and blue, now we've got a match made in heaven, right? Now we've got all of those colors mixing together to make the color that we want. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. You're actually going to want just a little bit, if you're going from this color to this color, you're going to want just a little bit of red. And I would still add a little bit of orange to that, but you're going to want a little bit of that to kind of balance everything out. That is kind of a process called filling. What I would personally do if I were coloring my hair at home, I would pick the color that I want and then scroll along and find something that's got just a little bit of red in it at the same level. So at black, that's going to be really tricky. And if you're okay with lightening it just a little bit and not being like midnight black, you can add like a little bit of a 3R into your formula, like maybe a quarter of your formula. So if you mix an ounce of black, I would maybe add, instead I would change it to 3/4 of an ounce of black and a 1/4 ounce of the 3R, okay? At black, like I said, you're not gonna be able to find a red at a black color, okay? So the other option is to add a kicker to it. Here's the thing with kickers. You're probably gonna wanna be real careful how much you add because you don't wanna mess with the color too much, and kickers tend to be really strong. But let me see if I can find something from Sally's, and I'll pop up a picture if I can find something of an example of this. Most kickers have amounts that they say don't add more than this on them. You're gonna have to read the description and kind of figure that out for yourself. I don't know them off the top of my head. I will say, since I am a cosmetologist, typically I do use this is gonna make me sound so pompous, but I do use what people call professional color. So professional color is typically only licensed professionals are able to buy this color. So we have brands like Redken Color, we have brands like Wella, and yes, I understand that Wella sells some stuff at Sally's too. They're not exactly the same thing, I promise they're not. We have things like Kenra Color, we have things like Matrix Color, but they don't sell those direct to the consumer. So I am typically using, that's what I use. That's what makes sense for me to use. But at Sally's, that's not always the case. So you're gonna have to read the instructions because I don't know off the top of my head. I'm sorry. Okay, I have to say this because I keep getting distracted by my eyeshadow. I don't love how this turned out. I know I probably shouldn't love it as much because it's very dark and smoky. I feel like this is almost like very club makeup, but it turned out cute. All right, moving on. Let's talk just a little bit about application because I fear that this is a piece that often is not taken seriously enough when it comes to coloring your hair at home. Number one, you guys need to section your hair when you're applying it to your head, period. I'm sorry, that is the way that it is. You can't stretch color to make it go further. Instead, what you're gonna end up is spotty results, okay? So here's what I want you to do. 1/4 inch sections, that's pretty small. 1/4 of an inch, that's a fairly small section. 1/4 of an inch sections, and that's how you're going to apply it going through your hair. Now, I'm saying this from a cosmetology instructor perspective, but you are going to get the best and the easiest time saturating it with 1/4 inch sections. I promise you. Now, the other piece of this, your hair needs to be dry. Your hair needs to be dry when you're applying color. Unless the color states otherwise, it should be dry. I feel as if I shouldn't have to say that, but if your hair's not dry, what's happening is some of your hair has water in it and it's not going to soak up the color because something's already occupying that space, okay? Dry hair. The other piece of that is, and I know, I get it, I get where people are coming from with this, but please, if you are retouching your hair, don't apply scalp to ends, ever. Never, never, okay? You're going to apply at your roots right up until that line of color and let that process. Because this is the reason. Are you guys familiar with the term hot roots? I'll pop up a picture again, just so that you guys know what I'm talking about when I say this. The term hot roots essentially means that the top of your hair is way lighter or brighter or whatever than the ends of your hair. This often happens with reds. That's not the only time it happens, but it often happens with reds. Okay, essentially what's happening there is, well, there's a few things that happens there. Especially with box dye, the most common thing that happens there is you have a ton of built up color on the ends of your hair. So it just starts getting darker and darker and darker until what's growing out of your head has the least amount of color on it. And so it's colored to the color that the box originally said it would. But the ends of your hair have so much color on it that it's eventually darkened. Unless that's the look you're going for, don't pull it down. Don't scout to ends your hair color every time. Instead, what I want you to do is, if you absolutely need a refresh of your hair color and you're unwilling to buy a second product to help refresh the ends, what I want you to do, apply it to your roots, let it process for 45, I'm going to say 90% of the time. We're going to say it's going to process for about 90% of the time. So if your hair processes for 100 minutes, it's going to sit for 90 minutes, okay? I don't know any hair color that processes for 90 or 100 minutes, but that's my example because easiest math, right? Then you're going to take your bowl of leftover color and just slap it on the ends real quick. Let that finish processing for the rest of the 10 minutes, okay? If you are willing to buy two separate colors, one for your roots, one for your ends, that's actually what I would do to refresh your ends. Especially if you're like, it's losing vibrancy, it's not quite what I want it to be anymore, I would put your root color on for your retouch, right? And I would buy a second color, make sure that it's a demi-permanent, and apply that to your ends. Like maybe you're wanting it to be like a red color and you just retouched your red on your roots, but it's kind of turning a little bit orangey. I would pick out a separate demi-permanent to put over the little bit of orangey there. Editing shell here. So I realized when I was talking about touching up the ends of your hair, I forgot to mention that if you're picking a color, it should never be darker than the color that you're coloring your roots with. In fact, I would even go a level lighter than the color you're touching up your roots with, because that way it kind of helps so that when you're, quote, piling on color, it's not going to affect that. That's all. I know that people don't like this and it's more work or possibly more money, but you're going to get better overall results and not nearly as much of buildup throughout the rest of it. It's just a smart thing to do. If I haven't iterated enough, the application is so vital. I don't know why more people don't make a bigger deal about it. More often than not, actually, some of the biggest things that I see when people come in to the salon for a hair fix is actually spottiness. They have like spots of where it didn't process the same, and it's majority of the time because they didn't take the time to section things out and make sure that they were saturating everything fully. So that is so key to getting a fantastic color every time, the saturation. It just has to happen. I do want to kind of reiterate this. You can get a beautiful color at home. You just kind of have to know the rules. Hair color is very color theory based. And quite frankly, that's a huge reason that I see people that are like, oh my gosh, I put this purple on my orange hair and it turned kind of pinky. Well, it's because you weren't paying attention to color theory. It's the same thing for when people are like, well, I was told that I needed to tone my hair, and they pull out a blue shampoo. I love blue shampoo, and there are reasons to use blue shampoo to tone your hair. Again, if your hair is primarily yellow and you put something blue on it, those colors make green. And so making sure that you're keeping this into account, I want you to have the best hair that you can possibly have. And this hopefully helps you to be able to pick out the best products for your hair color. I tried to keep everything really surface level. I don't know if you could tell I was kind of chomping at the bit to share more, but it really wouldn't make a lot of sense without more context to it. So I didn't. Hopefully I shared enough that there's like at least some grain of understanding, but I would love to dive into this more if you guys are interested. So let me know in the comments below. I am going to end things here. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.